Hi everyone, my name is Nicholas Bulins. I'm a program administrator at the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, and I'm a coordinator of the Massachusetts Dredging Program. Thanks for taking the time to join us today and watch this video and to learn more about the Dredging Program. So today I will be walking us through an agenda that you should see here on your screen. What I'm basically going to do is follow the content of our 2020 request for proposals. My goal is to walk us through the document and to relay the information in a convenient, digestible way. And I also plan to review some of the mechanics of actually applying to the program. Our submission process is 100% electronic, but it's not entirely seamless. It's not one big portal. First, you fill out the application as a file on your computer. Then you upload the application and attachments using a web form. So there's a couple of different steps, and I want to go over those during the presentation to hopefully make the submission process easier for everyone that's listening. I'll be also sharing tips, reminders that we encourage you to think about as you prepare the application to make it competitive. I'll also touch on another funding resource at EOHED that's a great alternative for any community that's not quite ready for construction. And then finally, we'll open up the call to questions. So, for some background, the Dredging Program is the first of its kind in the Commonwealth. It's the first standalone grant program to not only offer focused funding for dredging, but to make that funding available to all coastal communities on an annual competitive basis. It builds on the success of a pilot round that we launched, the Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Toledo launched in the summer of 2018. That resulted in $3.6 million awards to 10 fully permitted projects. Because of the strong interest that we saw in the 2018 round and having heard from municipalities up and down the coast about how important dredging is as a critical long-term need for the success of our harbors, the pilot program became a filing in the Governor's 2018 Economic Development Bond Bill, and that's what created this capital program that was reestablished as the Massachusetts Dredging Program, which we have today. Our goal of the program is the same as it was in the pilot round, which is to prepare coastal communities for success in the blue economy. We take a very broad view of the blue economy and what it means for a coastal community to participate in it. By our definition, which you can see on the screen, the blue economy encompasses not just commercial activities like fisheries, transportation, tourism, but also quality of life activities, recreation, public spaces in our harbor, and also what we need to make all those activities possible, namely safe and resilient harbors. So I do want to note here that at the beginning of your application, you'll actually be asked to choose one of these kind of buckets as your primary goal, but the rest of the application does give you the opportunity to fill out all categories and make your best case possible. So what does the program actually do? It provides one-year construction grants for saltwater dredging projects. It's administered by the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, and its purpose, as I alluded to earlier, is to support the long-term strength and sustainability of the Commonwealth's coastal harbors and blue economy. In practice, this means we focus on shovel-ready projects that contribute to one or more of the categories or strengths that we associate with the economy, and those are listed here on the screen. The economic significance of a coastal harbor, the recreational value that that harbor provides to the public safety within the harbor, and resiliency of the harbor's resources. So 2019 was our inaugural round, so I thought I'd briefly run down the anticipated impact of those projects. We awarded $4.1 million for 5 projects with over $5 million leveraged in local funds and in-kind costs. We're anticipated that that will remove about 90,000 cubic yards of material from about 40 acres of tidelands. Collectively, we're expected that to support over 950 moorings and slips, navigation and berthing for about 150 commercial vessels, and the livelihood of about 8 harbor-dependent businesses and organizations. Those are things like boat yards, haul and launch services, and marinas. And to kind of put that all in perspective, 90,000 cubic yards is roughly equivalent to 28 Olympic swimming pools. So you can keep that visual in mind when you think about just how much we're removing to our harbor to really make them more valuable and create opportunities for growth. What's new in the 2020 round? Short answer is not too much. If you applied in the 2019 round or reviewed our 2019 applications, you won't see a lot of substantial differences from year to year. There are some changes that I do want to note, though. First, what we allowed for use as matching funds has changed. I'll talk more about that in another slide or two, but the key change here is that pre-construction expenses and in-kind contributions are no longer eligible as part of your actual match. They can, however, be taken into account as part of the application's overall evaluation, thinking of them as costs over and above the match that municipality has incurred. Again, I'll get into that in a little bit. We've added new questions this round to help communities specify whether a project is actually a phased portion of a larger dredging plan. That way you can make your case for why completing this particular phase on the same project site is really important. We've also reworded some of our questions related to the recreational benefits. Purpose here is to expand the arguments that you can make as to why your project is important from a recreational public value perspective. And lastly, we are now considering how a project promotes equitable opportunity, as that is described in the Governor's new Partnership for Growth Economic Development Plan. One of the principles of the plan essentially reminds consider how a project benefits vulnerable populations. To that end, we've added a new question that asks whether a harbor is within 1 mile of an environmental justice population or a similar population of need, and if so, what are the benefits that the harbor provides for those populations? So as a point of reference, environmental justice population is actually something that is a term that is defined by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. They are 2010 census groups with high minority, non-English speaking, or low-income populations. These are actually already mapped on the Commonwealth's webpage. You can see the link for it in the presentation. So when you're completing your application, you just need to view that map, consider whether the harbor has any benefits for those populations if they are nearby. So here's the who, what, and how much of the program. All 78 coastal municipalities are eligible to apply with a 1 application limit per municipality. Joint applications are accepted, but if a community does submit a joint application, it can't also submit a single application. You can only sign on to 1, and that can either be single or joint. What's eligible for funding, generally speaking, is any bidding, construction, or construction administration costs that are associated with the dredging and disposal of the dredged material. This is a cost reimbursement program, so we reimburse you at a rate of 50% up to the amount of your grant award. Pre-construction costs, which we define as study, design, engineering, permitting, real property transactions associated with the project, those are not eligible for reimbursement, which is one of the reasons why this shovel readiness is really important for these projects when we consider them. How much is available? The maximum amount that can be requested is $2.5 million per municipality, so that does mean joint applications can request over that amount as long as the request does not exceed the $2.5 million per community. Any application will also be considered for a partial award during the review and award process. So everyone can keep that in mind, that even if we're unable to fund full award amounts, we definitely consider partial awards. So the program award requirements, this is the non-state match. So grants require minimum 50% non-state funding match. That funding match does have to be, again, from a non-state source, but you can use multiple sources to make up that match. So we allow federal grants, municipal funds, also private contributions as long as they're going towards the actual municipal project. The changes I mentioned compared to some previous years is that pre-construction expenses and in-kind contributions are no longer eligible to be counted as but we will consider them in the overall assessment of an application. So if you had pre-construction expenses paid with municipal funds in the last 3 fiscal years, you have the opportunity in the application to explain those costs, explain the amounts, so we can take them into consideration as certainly skin in the game that the community has had and the work it has been doing to build up to this construction point. So contracting. Successful applicants will be required to submit match documentation and also all your permits and drawings for the project. The anticipated start date for a grant contract is July 1st, which is the beginning of the fiscal year. All grant funds must be expended by June 30th, 2021. That's why shovel readiness is key, and that is just the nature of this being a capital grant program. Capital funding expires after about a year, so we have to make sure that the project can be finished within that time. In measuring shovel readiness, this is essentially what we ask ourselves. Is the design fully funded? Are all the permits secured? Are the match funds secured? And is the project schedule realistic given the scope of the project, the need for bidding, things like that? Requirements for grant management. Be aware that quarterly performance reports are required. Payments are dispersed up to once a month for actual work completed, so you have to send us an invoice and then we reimburse for half of that invoice essentially. Other deliverables that we'll ask for, your bid tabulations and bid plans, construction contracts, any change orders, post-dredge survey to prove that the project was essentially constructed, and a form of certification that says the project was completed. We do hold 5% of the award as retainage until the contract is actually closed out. Submitting your application. They are due by electronic submission no later than 11:59 p.m. on April 1st. No late submissions accepted, no paper submissions accepted, and applications must be typed. As I said, it's all via electronic submissions, which I'll go through a little later in the presentation. Application has 7 sections. You have your project summary, which is a snapshot of the project. Harbor profile, where we ask you to describe characteristics of the harbor, economic significance, and this is where we talk about the environmental justice benefits. Project description, describe the need, the scope, the benefits, and the shovel readiness of the project. Your budget and funding sources, this is a table where you describe the sources of the match, whether the match is secured. Your largest section is what we call supporting the blue economy. This is where you describe existing conditions and the anticipated benefits of the project for those 4 strength categories. So commercial fishing and boating, recreational boating, public safety, and coastal resiliency, those kind of 4 buckets that you saw earlier. Preparing for success, this is where you describe your planning efforts, municipal funds, maintenance plans, any commitments from private partners to the extent that's applicable, basically kind of showing that you're doing good work to make sure that your project is successful, that you can maximize its benefits, and that possibly you're catalyzing some private investment. And then contract, certificate of authorization, essentially you don't have to sign this as an electronic form. Do not print it out, sign it, scan it, and then submit it. We want a Word document submitted. So the attachments. You are required to submit a site plan, so that is absolutely required this year. This should be essentially a nautical chart or a satellite image that clearly identifies the project site so we can visually see. We don't just have to rely on the actual permitting drawings to try to figure out everything. It's a nice visual, the site plan is. We do need copies of all your permits and permit modifications that have been approved to date. Those should include the drawings so we can see the actual kind of specs for the permit. Statements of collaboration if this is a joint application, and if this is applicable, letters of commitment from any private partners if those private partners are willing to commit that they're going to be investing to create new harbor jobs, add more commercial vessels to the harbor, or if they're actually going to do their own dredging project in association with yaws. So key thing to remember is these are not letters of support. They're actually commitment letters promising to invest private dollars. So those are definitely things we're interested in. Optional attachments, if you would like to do graphic documents that you think are useful, those will be accepted. Just make them reasonable in number. They're reviewed, but they're not formally evaluated. So again, it's just to kind of give us normally visuals. Additional attachments should not be put into the application essentially unless we otherwise require it or ask it above. So the steps for submitting the application, as I said, essentially an electronic process. You're going to visit the program's How to Apply page. You should have already gone there to get the instructions to join this online meeting. The RFP is there, and we strongly recommend that you download it and read it in full, not just because we took the time to write it, but because it contains really important information about how your project is going to be evaluated. Download and complete the application on your computer. Once the form is completed, we recommend saving it with all your attachments in a common folder. And then you're going to label each of those files using a naming system that we outlined in the RFP. It's on page 9. We provide lots of examples. Really important for us because we're getting a lot of files in. Each of them is kind of being named differently, and we want to put a system to that so we can easily grab them and understand what exactly was submitted and organize them appropriately. You're going to upload your application and those attachments electronically, and you're going to use it on our website. We're actually going to add a link to the website that's going to be available starting March 18th. That's going to be on the How to Apply webpage. It brings you to a form where essentially you complete basic sheet information and then attach your files and submit. There is a confirmation message at the end of all that that goes straight to your email address so you know that it has been accepted. How to apply. So when you're completing your application, this is actually a Word document that you download online. Don't delete any of the original text. You're only going to add text into the field. Last year, we locked the document entirely, and you could only fill things in. That ran to some complications for some people, depending upon their version of Microsoft Word. So this year, I'm not locking the document. The only thing that is locked is the actual answer field. So hopefully, that'll make it more convenient for everyone, but do not delete any of the original wording that's there. We have the fillable fields. These are essentially what we want you to fill in. Those gray text boxes that I point out. You have check boxes as well. You just check yes or no. Tables are also in there, like your budget table. And then you have your narrative answer boxes, which all say click here. Important thing to note is the answer boxes and the tables will expand automatically, so you don't have to worry about when you're typing. A scroll bar, you not being able to see things, and not being able to fit your answers. Everything will expand as needed to accommodate what you're putting in. When you're uploading your application and attachments, as I said, you got to click on a web form that's going to be available through a link on the How to Apply page, and that's going to be available starting March 18th. Attachments have to be submitted one after another, so it's not something where you can save and come back later. You want to open up the web form and then be prepared to upload everything at once. That's why it's important to have everything in that common folder on your computer to make it easy for you. The web form has on-screen instructions. You just follow them. The screens are going to kind of look like the web shot that I right-hand side. This screen actually shows where you upload your application. I wanted to point this out because after you upload your application, at the bottom of the screen, it essentially asks you how many attachments you have. You want to make sure you put in a number so that way it brings up the right amount of screens for you to do all your attachments. If anything ever goes wrong or you find out you need more screens, you hit the previous button. It'll take you back to the beginning. And it will allow, it essentially doesn't delete any information when you hit previous. So it is a very versatile button that allows you to go back and forth through the application, make changes before you submitted it. You just can't leave the application because it won't save at that point. Some helpful tips that I want to always let communities know to help them really think about their application and make it as competitive as possible using the narrative. Support your statements with examples, numbers, other data, particularly if we ask for that data or if the data is available. Not all statements speak for themselves, oftentimes communities will make a very general statement, which we understand is accurate, but in order to actually, allow us to evaluate it and consider it strong, it really helps to add those examples and numbers and data if it's available. So just be aware of that. Definitely complete all sections. We can't evaluate what isn't answered. So if you think your project is in that recreational category, fill that out, but do not skip the commercial or the coastal resiliency or the public safety category. Fill them all out and do what you can with them, so that way we can evaluate and give you the considerations that we can. There's no word or character limit, provide complete answers, but be mindful of that length. As I said, those answer boxes will expand, but we don't want to see 3 pages for one answer, even though it will accommodate that. For ease, what I usually recommend is that you kind of type up your answers on a separate Word document and then you copy and paste. That way you really have full flexibility in manipulating your narratives before they actually go into the application. So let's see, award decisions. So we have an evaluation committee that's composed of staff here at EOHED and also partners at the Massachusetts Office of Coastal Zone Management. The committee will prepare a list of recommended awards and will be basing that award on the evaluation criteria that's outlined in the RFP, in which I'm going to go over next. The amount of funding we have available, because it is limited, and the urgency of need for our project. We also do consider, the broad and equitable distribution of our limited funding up and down the coast. So we will take that into consideration as a possibility. And the list is subject to approval by Secretary Keneally and to ratification by the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. We notify all applicants of our decisions in writing for an award or a non-award, so don't think you'll be left hanging. So this is really important because I'm going to talk about the evaluation criteria, so how we're actually going to assess your application and its strengths. These are outlined in the RFP, so I wanted to talk about them here. So the first area, these actually correspond with each section of the application, is your harbor profile. So what we're going to look for here is the characteristics of your harbor, and are they consistent with what we call a developed harbor, which is actually right out of CZM's policies in terms of strategies for investment dredging. For this, we're thinking about what we're looking for is, what do you have for berths, launch ramps, offloading facilities, harbor-dependent businesses? What does your harbor look like? What are your characteristics of the harbor that might be associated with the downtown or community waterfront? So do you have public spaces, recreational boating resources, restaurants, retail shops, commercial zoning? And this is also where we consider any benefits of the harbor for an environmental justice population or a similar population. Bottom line for what we're talking about here is that we're looking for harbors that are a true public resource and that are actively engaged in the blue economy. And again, it's based on our broad understanding of what that term blue economy means, something I already talked about. Your project description, this is where we look at the strengths of the project need, the feasibility of the project scope of work, and the evidence of shovel readiness. Your budget and funding sources, we're going to look at the extent to which pre-construction costs have been funded, demonstration of your 50% or greater non-state match, and evidence that all the match funds have or secured. So I do want to note here that 50% is considered a minimum match requirement, so commitments that go above and beyond that, above that cost share, are certainly taken into consideration. So supporting the blue economy, remember this was your largest section. So what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate each of those categories using the criteria below. Projects that are strong in multiple categories are generally more competitive, but don't feel that you have to be excelling in every category in order to be considered for the grant. So there's no minimum categories that you have to fit into. So first category, commercial fishing and boating. We look at the presence of any commercial fishing, aquaculture, or commercial boating activities, the strength of the project support for those activities as well. Recreational boating, what's the presence of a region-wide boating public? So region-wide is the key there. For evidence of that, we're looking for launch ramp facilities. What are the parking at that launch ramp facilities? Do they allow, do they have spaces for boat trailers? And what are the accommodations for in the harbor as well? So those are some important things that we consider. And a quick note here, don't forget to talk about your marinas when discussing recreation. As I mentioned earlier, we've reworded some of the questions in this section, so we hope the new language prompts the applicant to really expand their arguments for recreational benefits, which can include marinas. A demonstration of an actual or imminent risk to public safety due to shallowing, and the strength of the project support for public safety, which we measure based on the reduction of risk and also any increases in emergency personnel responsiveness. Coastal resiliency, the strength of the project support for preserving and protecting or restoring coastal resources. So your barrier beaches, wetland resources, water quality, of course. We look at all that and what the project can do for those things. How demonstration of how the dredged material will be beneficially used. So if the material coming out of the harbor is clean sand, what are you doing with that? And demonstration of how the project aligns with a city's or town's municipal vulnerability plan, if that is applicable. So preparing for success. These evaluation criterion in this section are really about showing that you've been proactive in planning for future maintenance and the development of your harbor as well. So how will you as a municipality sustain the benefits of the project? We look for evidence such as a dredging maintenance plan, local planning documents, revenue for your harbor or water-related fees. In addition, will the project act as a catalyst for harbor development or additional infrastructure improvements? So we ask, will the project generate private investments in jobs, commercial vessels, or additional dredging projects? Things we like to hear in this section, and we do realize that communities can't hit everything, but I'm just trying to, let you know about good things to definitely talk up in the application. A comprehensive dredging permit. This means a community has incorporated all their dredgeable areas in a harbor or across the community, as well as their disposal under a single federal or state permit. We like that because we know that you can then act on that permit essentially any time over a period, probably up to 10 years, assuming you have funding available. A harbor or DPA master plan. This tells us that the community has really thought about its inventory, taken an inventory, of the harbor, and thought carefully about what you want from your harbor to see it grow and how you want to participate in the blue economy. We also like to see dedicated revenue sources for dredging or at least harbor infrastructure. So this helps increase our confidence that the benefits of the project can be sustained in the future. Regarding private development, a great example of what we think of catalyzing a private project is piggyback dredging. In this scenario, the municipality hires the dredging contractor, and while the contractor is there, the local marinas or other businesses take that opportunity to use that contractor and dredge their areas. So that immediately increases the economic value of their businesses, and it also takes advantage of our investments in the project, and it takes advantage of economies of scale, which is a great thing to know that private growth is also being triggered. So general questions regarding the RFP will be accepted by email through 5 p.m. on March 18th. So if any questions pop up after this application, feel free to email them. after this presentation, you send the questions to that email address on the screen. Just put in the line dredging RFP. We will respond to general questions and reserve the right not to respond to any or all. Similar questions might be all lumped in together, so we're providing a single response. And then we will put the written response on our website so you can check that out. We will be available up to the day of the application to assist with any technical difficulties because this is an electronic submission process. You might have trouble. I will be here sitting at my desk until 5 p.m. on that day. After that, unfortunately, you'll be on your own. So just be aware that if you want to make sure if there's any technical difficulties, you get the process over with before 5 p.m. on the due date. Some final reminders and tips. All awards do have to be expended by the end of fiscal year 21, so that's June 30th. Be sure to read the RFP in full. It does give more described here, and it really goes into that evaluation criteria and what we think about. Complete all your sections. Can't stress that enough. Don't skip anything because provide what answer you can so that way we can evaluate as much as possible and essentially give you points wherever we can. Provide those examples, numbers, if it's available, and specifically when we ask for it. And don't forget to consult and collaborate with other municipal staff because some of those questions might not be known to you, but other municipal staff can give you great narratives to help with that out. Now, if you're a community that doesn't have that shovel-ready project, isn't quite there yet, might need another year, another great resource for you to consult with is the Seaport Economic Council Grant Program. So for the first time this year, they're actually allowing funds for dredging, design, and permitting through a competitive process. So I've been working with the administrator of the program over there to kind of devise a special dredging application for design and permitting projects. So it's a great opportunity now to be able to apply and get funding for that, which can help prepare you for applying to our program. A few other things the program provides, municipal harbor plans, designated port area master plans. Those are great. They actually provide really good information for when you write your application, and again, something we consider in terms of whether you're preparing yourself for success. And then, you know, sometimes during the dredging process, you're also thinking about the coastal infrastructure, the piers, the boat ramps, public safety buildings. The Seaport Economic Council program does provide funding for that. It's eligible and it is competitive, so you can certainly apply. Contact information is on the right-hand side. The next round is coming up in May, so it would be a great time if you would like to apply for that dredging, design, and permitting cost to get that in. Then you may be ready for the next round of our program for construction. That brings us to the end of the presentation, so thanks everyone for hanging in there with me. I am going to return this recording off, and then I'm going to open up to questions on the phone here. Take care.